Thanks for joining us. My name is Reagan, and I have my co-host here, Nicole. And I'm one of the accounting architects here at Truin. And just like a quick background about myself is that I'm a CPA, and I started my career off at EY Honolulu in audit, and then moved to EY San Francisco, where I then transferred to GL Accounting at Fin, which is formerly known as Intercom. And now I'm here at Truett, working to, implement AI solutions here in the accounting world. So before we kind of get started, this is being recorded. Nicole is my co-host. She'll be moderating and keeping an eye on the Q&A in the chat. So if any questions, issues come up, please drop it in there and she'll be monitoring that. Yeah. So let's get started. So on our agenda today, first we'll be going through a quick recap of AI and Accounting 101, just for context in what we did or a refresher. And then we'll cover why we use Claude Code specifically and where it kind of fits across maybe different accountants' clauses. Followed by a few minutes on how to prompt LLMs correctly or AI in general. And then we'll get into the first part. It's a two-part kind of demo. First, we'll run with the AI agent we created from 101. We will create journal entries, and then we'll run a reconciliation across a couple months and have it explain all the variances we identified. And at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. So with that, let's get to the recap of 101. So for anyone who joined 101, here's just kind of a refresher. And for those who didn't, here's just like the TLDR. So on the first session for 101 on July 7th, we walked through kind of like the core idea of how to record a conversation into a standard operating procedure, or as we like to call it, an SOP. And we used that SOP to have Claude Code process a payroll register into a journal entry by creating an agent. So our plan for today is we're going to use that same we're going to use that same agent that we created in 101, but it's going to create two new payroll journal entries in February that have some real world wrinkles that are like there's a new hire, bonus, department transfer, 401k elections. Um, and then the second part will be, we're going to run a reconciliation agent across multiple months and ask it to explain um, those variances. And so, if that sounds useful for close, it definitely is. And with that, let's get to our first polling question. So the question is, what's a way to create instructions so the agents post the journal entry the same way every time? And then I'll give you all like a minute to respond to that.
So this is the results of the question one. Correct answer is an SOP. It's going to be a document of your step-by-step procedure.
Yep, exactly. So, yep, the answer is yeah, B, SOP document, step-by-step procedure. And I think like the reason for it is SOP just kind of documents steps to create a journal entry step by step, what's everything involved, all the external sources that are needed. So it's just like a really good way for the for AI to kind of just follow on what you are looking for. All right, thanks. We'll close that poll. All right. So one of the questions and feedback we got from 101 was why did I use Claude Code to create the agent instead of Claude Cowork? And that's like that was a really good question. And we didn't have enough time to kind of like really dive into it. So we'll kind of provide some context right now. I use Cloud Code to create journal entries from the payroll register because I wanted to create an agent or an AI agent that followed like a step-by-step details, aka the SOP, so that it doesn't deviate from the instructions. Because I gave Claude the SOP, which follows those instructions. And it really tries to follow it as much as possible when you put it into like kind of cloud code. And it's valuable because it's a little bit more, it's repeatable. It kind of follows instructions more consistently. And it's a little better for trying to like automate, like I would say like journal entries kind of for this reason. Cowork can't could do it, but I would say it's not quite as consistent. And because you're using like Python code when you're using Cloud Code, it kind of puts rules together when you're using Cloud Code. And if you were to use Cowork, it would take a little bit more liberties maybe next time you try to use it for a different month or when you do it a different time. Um, so that's just kind of like context and why we used Claude Code to kind of create the agent last time and what we'll be using this time around as well. And then I also mentioned that when we created that it generated into a skill. And whether you're familiar or not with skill, a skill is, it's something like you imagine you had an intern and you told it how to do a certain process every time. They took notes down, they documented it on themselves. When you want them to do this task again, you're not going to explain all the instructions to them again. You're not going to tell them where to look for everything. Um, because in theory, they should have all that knowledge after the first time you told them. And the skill is something similar where when you activate the skill, the intern essentially knows where to look and knows what the task is with context. And so for the context of this workshop, we create our skill that we created with the agent. Um, it's pretty much it knows how to create the payroll journal entries based off the instructions and the SOP that we gave it. So for repeatable tasks, like kind of in accounting, where you do like similar tasks every month, it's very helpful because you just use the backslash command and you activate it and it gives context. And you might have to give it a little bit more context into what it's doing, but it could just be as simple as skill, do this for June 2026. And then that might be all it needs to execute what you really want. So the kind of takeaway of skills is the skill turns, let me explain this again, into you already kind of know, it already knows what you like and how you like it. And that's kind of the whole idea to save you kind of time with that. So I'm curious, anyone here has used Claude Code or Cowork for anything for accounting, or have used skills for any within any AI tool? Please share in comments. Okay, and then the last topic we will get to before we kind of get into the live demo is how to prompt effectively. Um, because honestly, a good prompt is kind of half the battle when you're using AI. And I would say for accounting, I would say these kind of five tips I find to be very helpful is one, be specific with the file paths. Say kind of exactly where the output will come from, where the files are going. And that's like if are able to connect Google Drive or SharePoint to your computer as well. But you can also always just attach the files. But I've learned that maybe you attach like three or four files. Sometimes if you don't specifically call out what each file is for, the AI will sometimes kind of hallucinate on what each file is for. So just be specific with what the files are for and where they're coming from. Two is point it to the SOPs. So don't, re-explain the rules every time. In the prompt, use SOP to kind of like use it as like kind of the logic for it to follow. Stays it consistent. and you don't have to keep repeating instructions. Three is tell it to run validation checks. In accounting, um, we want it to like everything's about kind of checking work, making sure that things kind of tie out. So validation checks are just kind of a way for Claude to kind of check its work, make sure and document any inconsistencies kind of within it. Four, is give it the why. Help it understand why it's doing this. If you're comparing periods with one another, like you're doing a flux analysis, mention that. Because when it knows like kind of the context of the task, um, it kind of does a better job of understanding of what you're trying to do, and it will give out a better output. And sometimes I like to just give it like in our scenarios, like you're a payroll accountant who is writing payroll. And like, maybe it doesn't matter, but it kind of just gives a context that like, okay, you're an accountant specifically in payroll and you're the one doing the payroll entry. And then lastly, it's be explicit about the structure. You want to process each run kind of like independently and write a separate workbook for each. If you want two outputs, say two. If you want one consolidated file, say that. So just being like specific and explicit about what you want with it. I think the more vague you are, the more open to interpretation the prompts are. I think the higher chance that you might not get what you quite want from the LLMs. So, yeah. So I just wanted to give you this information to kind of like help with any future prompts you might have. Then our second polling question is, why use Claude rather than a more flexible assistant to post a recurring journal entry? And then I would say a flexible assistant could be like co-work. It could be any of the chat functions where it's like chat GPT or just the regular Claude that you have on your desktop or app. So we'll use that, leave that open for a little bit. Okay, I think we're good. So the answer is B, and like everyone got this one. Great job. And B is correct. It's uh the answer is oh, excuse me. Cloud Code, runs the same like codified SOP every period. It's more consistent, it's more audible. Um, and oh, excuse me. So I would say, yeah, you get more consistency and repeatability when using Claude Code. Um, and I would say a more flexible assistant like Cowork or just chat kind of reinterprets the task maybe a little bit each time, whereas Claude Code runs the same codified workflow. And I will say this, Cowork, if you're using Claude, is also very powerful as well. I think if you'd ask it to generate a journal entry, it would still do a pretty good job. I just think if you're trying to have cowork do it every time repeatably, it might take a little bit more liberties and be a little bit reinterpret the task than if you were to use it in Cloud Code. Yeah. All right. Thank you. You guys are killing it on the polling questions. So let's get into the live demo, and I will share my screen. So what I have here, kind of before we kind of get into the demo, is what I have here is Claude Desktop. And Claude Desktop is different from Claude when you have maybe on the app on your phone, or maybe Claude as just in the browser. What this is that it's like a downloaded application that's on my computer. And what the difference is that you can connect it to different things on your computer. It has access if you want to attach files into folders on your desktop or onto your computer. It has, kind of access to that. And that's just kind of like a brief explanation. Um, and so if we go here, this is just like home code. And if I create a new chat here, it's just if you want to do the regular chat, you have this here. And then you have cowork, you could toggle it over there. And then we have Claude Code, which is its own kind of like tab right here. And just for context, this is kind of like the paid version. So anyone can download Claude Desktop, but if you don't have the paid version, you'll just have access to chat. So there are different varying ones. If you have one for work, it's probably an enterprise account. If you have a personal one, it's probably like some type of pro account. And then the last thing I want to kind of get into is you see this thing here which says models and high. So if I create a new session, I can choose which model I want to use. And you'll see they're ranked one, two, three, four. One means it's the most powerful model. So it's like, I guess I would say it's the smartest. It can do the most things with it and the fastest. And four being the slowest. Um, right now, I've been using two because Opus 4.8, it's still powerful, but it's not as powerful as Fable 5. And I think the reason for that is just more like you have tokens, which are essentially like you can only use it so many times, and the higher the model, the more tokens and usage it uses. So if it's a simple task, like what would be a good task? Like explain what a reconciliation is to me, or uh, something like that. I would use like haiku. I'd use haiku 4.5. You don't need something that powerful to ask it like a more simple question. But if you're trying to create an agent, you're trying to create journal entries, you're trying to give it a big data file you want to analyze, I would use maybe Opus or Fable 5 potentially. Yeah. Okay, so let's kind of get into it. So we kind of ran this all already prior because creating this live, generating it live, it would take a little bit of time. So we kind of just ran this ahead of time, and we have the files saved over. So I'll kind of walk you through what I did to get it. So we want to, as a payroll accountant, we want to generate the payroll entries for February 2026. We got the payroll register and we want to create the entries for it. So you'll see here that this part is kind of highlighted. And the reason for that is that this is the skill that we created in 101. So if you want to see how this skill is kind of prompted, is you just use the backslash command, and then the skill is called Maple Biweekly Payroll JE. So I'm going to type in Maple, and then you'll see that it pops up here. So I'm going to just click enter, and then that's skill. And this just tells Cloud Code, hey, everything, all the instructions we gave you in the SOP, all the instructions and feedback we gave you when we created that journal entry for January in the last workshop, I want you to repeat this, but I want you to repeat it for February 2026. So that's kind of how the skill works. It references what you did in the past, what you taught it, and then it's using that. And so down below, it's just kind of showing the thinking, what it's going through. We don't really need to analyze that too much. And then so it asks me two questions here. It wants to confirm that should it combine the journal entries together? Is it just one payroll run? Because there are two, February 14th and February 28th. And so I told it I want it in both for both. And then I told it what folder it should go into. And then so if we keep scrolling down, we'll see that it told us that it's done, it gave us a summary, and some things that it flagged. So let's take a look at what Claude generated for February. Okay, let me zoom in a little bit. So tab 2 here is the raw payroll register. So you can see here, this is a fictitious company called Maple Street Advisor Group. So don't worry, these aren't real people. You're not seeing the real salaries. So yeah, this is the payroll register. This could be coming from like ADP, Gusto, Rippling, Workday. And so we have this here, and the columns R and S were not part of the payroll register, and we recalculated the Social Security and Medicare from the employer side. It's like, okay, this looks, good. And then we're going to go to the journal entry side. And I'm like, this is off by 2000. I mean, as an accountant, our debits and credits need to balance. So this already does not look good. And then I also noticed that if we were to sum the amounts, actually, I guess it doesn't show it here, but in the raw payroll register, the total amounts are all hard coded and the amounts are wrong. So I'm like, okay, you missed the bonus line. You see that there's a bonus here for 2000 and it did not include it in the journal entry. So I'm like, all right, that's where 2000 that's where it's missing for the 2000. So I was like, all right, Claude, I need you to fix this. So I went back to Claude and just because it gets it wrong and like just kind of like intern, if the first time it goes and does it, it's wrong. It doesn't mean it can't do it. It just means you need to give it a little bit of feedback. So this is the prompt that I sent it. So I told it it should update the scale based off the questions it asked. And then I gave it additional comments. And I'm just going to kind of paraphrase here, but I told it I want it to resum all the amounts in the payroll register and compare it to the total that the payroll register has and identify any differences. The second thing is I told it I want it to add a journal entry line and that the bonus amount should be coded to the account 6301. And I think this is important because in accounting, the process might generally stay the same every month, but every month you might get something fairly new. And if it's something like a GL account where, Claude won't have access to your accounting ERP, it won't have access to everything in QuickBooks, it won't have access to things in maybe Sage or NetSuite. So you have to kind of give it this information. Because most likely it's not connected to your county ERP. So whenever things do change, you will have to kind of give it that information because it just won't have that context to update it. And then the last thing is I wanted to create some type of check between the payroll register and the journal entry to make sure that everything is included. So we don't get something like that 2000, that minus 2000, it doesn't balance. So let's go to the adjustment. Oh, sorry. So this is the adjustment that I made. So let's first go to the payroll register, tab 2. So you'll see that it added this check down here to identify any differences. So you'll see that it caught the 2000 that was footed incorrectly. There was $1 off from Medicare, and then net pay total was off by a little bit. And then we'll jump back to this a little bit later. And then now I want to check, all right, did it create a journal entry for the bonus? And then we will see here, it added it here and to the right account of 6301 for 2000. It's like perfect. And then we have it balancing here. And then the last thing I added was for it to reconcile the payroll register to the journal entry. So here you can see it's coming from tab 1, which is the journal entry. And then over here, it's the register and it's pulling from up top. And everything that's 0, we're having okay. So boom, perfect, exactly kind of how I kind of envisioned it. I'm like, all right, yeah, I kind of trust this a little bit more now. And then so this here is just like the journal entry tab you would kind of upload into your CSV, I mean, into your accounting ERP as a CSV. And then let's look at the 228 entry. And so this is also the adjustment one for the 228 journal entry. So you'll see here it added the same things, added the check, it added this check down here. And then there are no bonuses here, so we didn't really have to worry about that too much. But you see that, Claude did it wrong the first time. But we reprompted it. I reprompted it. I told it what to fix. I told it how to add validation checks. I was very explicit about kind of what, I wanted it to do. And, this is the output. So I think kind of just the story here is um, you want to be explicit about the instructions you're giving and be clear about what it did wrong and how you want to, to fix it. Yeah. All right. We will go to a bonus question, not bonus question, to a polling question now. And I will have Nicole share that question. All right, everyone, thank you for answering those polling questions. So let's get back to the demo. So in the last one, we had the agent in Claude Code create the journal entries for the 2 February payroll runs. And then we corrected it. We told it to please add a check, gave it the GL account for the bonus, and then it added all of those in. So now that we are good with the journal entry, naturally, for the month end close, if you're the accountant, you're going to want to make sure you post all the journal entries, you get to your reconciliations, and you address any fluxes. So that is what we're going to do. So this here is the complete output of when we made the adjustments to the journal entries. I'm going to scroll down here, and in order to create, I want to create an agent that will do the reconciliation for me and do the flux analysis. So this is my prompt. I'm not going to read through it, all of it, but pretty much what I said is I'm just giving context into the role that's the payroll content, accountant, and then I want to reconcile each payroll run from January to February, and that this is to do a reconciliation between the GL and the payroll register, and to do a flux analysis with that. And then I give it specific instructions here on how to do the reconciliation. So I want one tab to just be the raw payroll register year to date, combine it together. I want another tab to be the year to date journal entries related to payroll. And then the third tab would just be the reconciliation between the two and it being completely formulated. And we're not expecting any differences. For the flux, I also give specific instructions. I'm telling it to compare it to each payroll run by GL account and flag any differences. So really no materiality, just any differences. And if there are differences, to dig into it by individual employee to figure out why there is a flux. Um, and to kind of flag anything that kind of does pop up. And then I specified I want to make sure that it's formulated. They're not just hard coding everything, so it's easy to check. And then here I'm telling it I want this to be a skill that can be run every month, and then to ask me any clarifying questions before starting. And so the skill part that kind of goes back to what we did in the previous workshop in 101, and then kind of what we did today to generate the journal entries for the February runs. You just do the backslash command, and then it creates, it has all the skills, everything saved that you told it to do. And it's codified it. So it kind of knows, what to do. It has documented. And then I wanted to ask me any questions it might have before starting. In my experience, it just has a cleaner output. It gets it right. You get a better outcome on the first try. So I'm gonna scroll down. This is just all it's thinking. And then so here it calls out a few decisions will change how I build this. So this is Claude. When I did this live, Claude asked me for these 4 questions. And then I selected these answers. It gave me like 3 or 4 options, and I selected the one that best fit. You can also type in an answer if you don't like any of the suggested ones. But pretty much what I told it to do is that I want it to compare. I was just confirming that I wanted to compare each payroll run together. I was telling it which folder to go into. I'll tell it in the future when you roll it forward for the skill. I'll tell it what months it should compare, and then what account specifically. So it's just confirming its understanding so that it can put it together. Yep. And so this is all it's thinking still, and then boom. So it says here, done. Here's what I built and verified. And so let me jump to the output. Let me zoom in. So tab one here, this is the payroll register. Year to date, it's combined everything here between the January, February 14th, and February 28th payroll runs. And then in column S and T, it recalculated the employer, Social Security, and Medicare. So overall, this looks pretty good. But we'll see in tab three if it does reconcile. We have tab two here, which is the journal entries. Now, this, if you're in QuickBooks or Sage or NetSuite, you might already have a report where you just download all the journal entries. But so you could probably just give it that if you wanted to. So this is one. All right, so it looks good. Has all the entries for both. And then so I'm going to go to tab three. So this is the reconciliation. So it looks like tab E, or not tab E, column E is coming from tab one, which is the payroll register, through some S formula. So I like that. That looks good. Tab F is coming from tab two. I don't know why I'm keeping saying tab. Column F is coming from tab two, which is the journal entries. So this also looks good. And then so the differences here, we're checking for any differences. You can see they're all zero. And then we have a check here to make sure everything is zero. And then we're also doing a check by payroll run just to make sure that there wasn't any cutoff errors. So it looks like, we've reconciled the payroll register to the journal entry and we have no differences. Great. Reconciliation done. To me, this looks good to me. No additional things I need to add. And then in tab four, we have the flux analysis. So this is broken out by account name. So income statement and balance sheet accounts. So you see here, we're getting the fluxes here in column F and column G. And column H is just looking at if there are any differences above zero. But if I want to try to find this 2,769 difference here, I have to look down here to identify what is causing this flux. So I'm like, I don't really know where to look here. It's a little confusing. Um, so I want, as a reviewer, it's kind of confusing to look at. It's not easy. I want to have an explanation next to the flux that I'm seeing. Rather than having to go down here trying to figure out what is coming up with that number. So what I'm going to go do is I'm going to go back to Claude. I'm going to give it some feedback and tell it to fix it, just like you would if you had an intern or a new hire. You would tell it what to do it differently. So here's what I said, really short. I just said in tab four, which is what we're just looking at, the flux analysis, it is difficult to identify what explanations in the drivers of flag differences relate to the differences in the flux. Can you recognize it so that the explanation is next to the difference? Sorry, can you reorganize it so that the explanation is next to the difference? Keep the payroll run notes and summary. Also add the percent change as well. So those are just my feedback. It's detailed but straightforward. And then so we have the final output down here. So let me go to the file with that is adjusted. So we're not going to look at one, two, and three because none of that has changed based off the comments I gave it. We're going to go back to tab four. So you see here, everything's kind of remained in similar format, but it's added the percent change just like I asked in column G and column J. And then in column H and column K, it added the reason for the flux next to the difference. And it removed that section below it so that when we're looking at it, it can be a lot more easy to identify what is causing the differences. So you'll see here what caused the 2,769 difference. Let me zoom in a little bit more. It's because there was a department transfer from client services to tax and compliance. So makes sense why if someone's leaving the service line and going to tax, it increased. That makes sense. So then we're going to look here. I'm like, okay, well, if someone transferred into tax and compliance, it should increase by the same amount, but it didn't. There's a slight difference. But Claude has called out that, okay, 2,700 of the 4K difference is related to the transfer. And then 1,338 is related to a new hire who had their full salary um, in the 228 payroll run. And so we don't have to go through all of these, but you can see it's calling out the $2,000 bonus that we called out when we were doing the first demo today. Um, that is causing a difference in one bonus, which makes sense. And then that's also caused an increase in taxes as well. So all this makes sense. And then we're also seeing here that there is a change in 401k election from 4% to 6%. So all of this, kind of tracks. And I think if you were doing this for Flux, you probably would have some type of materiality. And I think that's something you can add into this. You could tell Claude, hey, my materiality is X% or X dollars. I only want you to do explanations for fluxes over those amounts. And it could definitely do that as well. But for this example, I just did any different so that I can just kind of show you that if you give it context, if it has access to the source data, it can give you a pretty good flux analysis. But I think the key thing is you still need kind of like human intervention in this. You still would want to check it. But instead of having to type this out, it kind of spits it out for you, and then you can kind of adjust it from there. So it saves you the time. It allows you to kind of investigate things. So if we scroll down, we told it to give it kind of like a summary and what should review and confirm. So as a payroll accountant, this is what it recommended doing. Confirming the headcount changes, checking the $2,000 bonus and if it was properly approved, if it got the right tax treatment. Confirming the proration of the new hire's salary was right. Confirming the department change, 401k election change, the health premiums. So I think these are all things that are like yes, it's good to do. But sometimes, maybe if you're too busy, you might not have time to like check. Um, and so these are, I feel like, as a former accountant who did payroll, um, these are things I would check every so often inside the HR platform. Um, and I think, just kind of having a summary of things to kind of just check, double click into to see if it's right. Because, maybe for example, if this 401k election change, um, maybe they didn't capture it correctly. Maybe it was 6% in the prior one. I just didn't update in time. I think that's something we'd want to check from a controls perspective to make sure that the system is updating things in a timely manner. So I think the story of here is like accountant or the AI can help accountants. It doesn't replace your job. It just enables you to it saves you time in things and allows you to do other things and analyzing more judgmental types of things. Um, because AI can't check your HR system to see if the tax treatment is right, to see if the tax compliance is right, unless you have it like set up, but you probably don't have it connected, which makes sense. So you would have to do that. So, it kind of saves you time doing this flux and doing the reconciliation, kind of investigating other things. Yeah. All right. Well, that is the end of our live demo. Yeah, so I will stop sharing and then we will jump back to the slides. Yeah, that is kind of the end of the demo. And just kind of in summary on what we did across both 101 and 102 is that, we used an actual accounting process that could be used for like a month end close. So for 101, we, recorded our payroll journal entry, or we recorded ourselves creating a journal entries. And with that, we transcribed it so that we could use it into create an SOP which is like a step-by-step rules, just written once. We fed that SOP into Claude, and Claude created with that SOP and the context of the step-by-step, it created an agent and skill. to convert the payroll register into journal entries that, can ultimately get uploaded into your county ERP. And then in 102, we took the agent that we did create. We used it on two brand new journal entries. Some of them had some differences that it didn't see in January. We iterated on top of it, we fixed it, and then once those entries were posted, we created an agent to reconcile those entries to the GL and to do a flux analysis as well. And then it also built in kind of like a review for the accountant to kind of look at. Um, so yeah, it kind of took you through 1 month, and then you're doing it for a second month, and you're repeating it, and then kind of what you would do as a payroll accountant from beginning to kind of end of your close. And so yeah, that is kind of just a recap of everything. So we use payroll as an example for this workshop, but it's not just limited, to payroll. For accounting, it's not just limited to payroll. This same process can work well beyond it, and it can be used for anything that, is rule-based, repeatable, and I think importantly has clean data. So if it's rule-based and it's repeatable, but you don't have clean, consistent data that you have, it might not be a good fit to try to automate it like this. But I think some examples that we've seen here at Truland, and just what I've seen is in different accounting processes, I've seen it used for prepaids, inventory, bank reconciliations or brokerages, fixed asset roll forwards, variance analysis, slash like flux analysis. Those are just kind of examples, but I'm sure there are like hundreds of examples out there that you can use for kind of like the same process that we kind of use. So I guess the takeaway here is kind of like SOP is the asset, Claude executes it, or AI executes it, and you as the human, as the accountant, are the one um, who knows kind of when something isn't right. You're guiding it. You're using it, AI, to kind of reduce the amount of work that you do, and it frees you up to do more things, to focus on maybe the more judgmental aspects, of accounting. And with that we have our Q&A. And so, Nicole, do we have any questions in um, the chat or the
We
Q&A?
do from the Q&A. Let me find it.
Okay,
It's
let's see it.
from David.
So one's from David. David said, I understand those transactions by Claude are fake, but how would I post those journal entries from Claude to my ERP? For example, if I used Sage. That's a really good answer. And so if you want to use those journal entries and post it into your ERP, I think, everyone has to set up a different way. I'd recommend that you probably set up some type of template, and you structure Claude. If you're doing payroll, for example, I would set up a template on how you normally upload it, and you make sure that Claude structures it in the way that works for your template so that you can just kind of upload it into Sage, for example. And then with that, it'll post. I think you can, like, if you wanted to create an automated process with Sage or QuickBooks, for example, with Claude, where it posts directly to it, I think that's something I would, one, maybe caution. Unless you have like maybe an engineer, your engineering or systems team kind of set that up for you. And I also think it's also very difficult, I think. I'm not an engineer, so I'm not exactly sure how it all goes into it, but at my previous company, it did take a lot of work to kind of set up to just one, research how to set it up, and two, what it would take to kind of connect Claude to NetSuite, because there are just a lot of things it needs to kind of create. So I would say I would not kind of expect it. I wouldn't have come in with the expectation that if you were to set this up, it can post directly to QuickBooks or Sage. But that's a really good question. So I think if I was doing this in this example, I would upload kind of like um, a journal entry template into Sage and then kind of upload it that way. Yeah, but really good question. Thanks, David. All right. Not sure if we have anything else. I think before we let everyone go, we have one last polling question. So the last question is, in an AI-assisted close, what's the right division of labor? A, Claude runs everything, unsupervised. B, SOP is the asset, Claude executes and you review the output. C, staff rebuilds each entry from scratch every month. And then D, skip the SOP to move faster. All right, we'll give everyone a couple more seconds. All right, let's close the poll. And everyone got it. It's B. SOP is the asset, Claude executes, you review the output. I would say definitely not A. You definitely don't want AI to be unsupervised. Definitely not with how it currently is. It's powerful, but it's not that powerful yet. So yeah, I would say it's B. You want to give it detailed instructions, let it do its job, but always make sure to review what it does and give it feedback. All right. So thank you everyone for attending the 102 workshop. It was a pleasure running this for 101 and 102. I hope you all learned a lot. If you have any questions, feel free to email engage@trytruewind.com. And if you're interested in any other future events that TrueWind is hosting, please check out the link that's in there, and you can go to www.truewind.ai slash webinars. And if you have any feedback at all about this, or you want to get more context into what we did here, feel free to reach out to myself or Nicole, or you can email engage@trytruewind.com. Yeah, and any last words, Nicole?
It's been wonderful having you guys. I will send out a follow-up email with the slides and the recording if you guys are interested in.
All right, wonderful. Well, hope you all have a great rest of your day and rest of your week. Thank you, everyone.